Hey guys. Danielle, how you doing?
Was that me last night?
Memorandums. I don't think we do memorandums.
How do we see who's on this besides Neil and Dan? Or are they the only two on it?
That's above my pay grade.
I know I can see it, but you can't see it even when you go on.
I was watching on both Zoom and from the website.
So you're streaming it and watching.
I'm going, trying to find one of them would give me some.
Yeah. I tried the TV station, I had no problem.
She had no problem. I went on it for some reason. All I got was like the old test things, it just a static. I had no show.
Okay.
I don't know why. I thought it was strange. Because that's where I had wanted to watch it. But would that have been any different from the streaming? Shouldn't have been, right? You're the same thing.
I'm texting Matt now.
Yeah, and I found
See what I can find out.
and the streaming,
We're talking about 95 tonight?
Lonnie, you know how to add somebody as a panelist?
No, I was like talking to myself and then Tony asked me a question.
Oh, finalist.
Okay, man.
there you go.
Yes, so who do you want, Anil?
No.
Who? Dan?
That's,
You want to bring that?
you know, put Neil on, yes,
You want him to do what?
be a panelist. Oh, we have panelists.
Now co-host.
Maybe.
And Andrew wants to get on.
He says he got kicked off.
Maybe we should move over so that Leilani can sit here.
All you need to do is you need to promote Andrew from
Yeah,
attending the panel.
Attendees, hold on. I can't.
Hey, Leilani, sit here.
No, I'm okay.
No?
No,
Are you sure?
I'm fine.
If you make me the host, I should be, I can try it.
Dan, is that you talking?
Yeah, I mean, someone made Neil the host.
Yeah, somebody made me the host. Thank you, but I don't think I should be the host. Can I, and is something I can do to de-host
Well, I think
myself?
if maybe, can you try just clicking on me and see if you can get the host?
I'm trying.
Let me do that. Let me see if I can do that. Yes, I can make you a host.
That's
Yeah.
Okay.
that's the host now.
So chair one is host.
I did, and I'm
Court
making,
guest, direct, board of.
Danny the host. Let me figure your life out with that.
Okay, so let me, I'm promoting Andrew the panelist. So that should allow him to get in here.
There you go. Now we get a pretty picture of him. Look at it.
They have Wi-Fi?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, they do.
It is?
It's,
Wait, what is this, court guest?
courtroom,
Yes, direct.
Wi-Fi's courtroom.
Yeah, and that's above my
Well,
pay
there's
grade.
court guest, you know, the password?
I just have.
Oh, look at my
Wi-Fi
man,
courtroom.
Jerome. Good evening, Jerome.
Jerry.
There you go.
How did the walk go?
But you locked the, did you leave the
Good job.
door?
So proud of you.
Jerry, I think you locked the outside door, though. You left the chair on the outside.
Yeah, so it's locked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know
No,
anything about the switch and I'm rather short.
Yeah, all you do is just keep that switched on the, before
No,
there.
I'm really not that short. I'm pretty tall for an Italian, honestly.
that's a better way to say above my pay grade.
Greetings from Town Village of Harrison, Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee.
Good evening, everybody. See if we're coming to work tonight. Good evening, everybody. This is the 3/28/23 FMAC meeting, Village of Mamaroneck. Do I have a motion to open the meeting? Motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Just
Aye.
Order. Please mute your phones and exit to the left and exit to the right. Okay, great. So first of all, Elsa, thank you for doing minutes. Can we just do quick review of the minutes? Any comments from 2/28/23?
Good evening, Tony. Tony, can you hear me? I just want to make sure.
Andrew, you're on.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm glad you followed the protocol. Thank you for that. Okay, so minutes 2/28/2023. Any comments? A motion to approve? So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes of 2/28/23 are approved. Okay, so we have tonight two guests that I want to have present. One is Neil Desai, who's our village comprehensive planner. And there are references to flood mitigation and flooding in the comprehensive plan. I wanted to give him an opportunity to present it to us and then for us to add our comments to him, which then he will evaluate, I guess, with our village manager and Dan Sarnoff to whether it gets added to the comprehensive plan or not. So Neil, we see you on our little screen and our big screen. And we have just from kind of left to right, Bernie Camadra, Patty Cipollelli, our trustee representative Leilani Reed, Geyser Reed, Stephen Glenner, David Finch, Elsa Rubin, Tony Gelber. In the audience, we have Peggy Jackson, Jerry Barbieri, and Kate Dejas. So how do you want to do this, Neil?
I don't know, the whole roster.
I could just start. I may share my screen. Let me just do that briefly. Get this going. Let me get to the cover. So I just want to introduce, for those who may not be aware, the village is, this is the draft, the 2023 comprehensive plan for the village. Comprehensive plan is a planning document. It's in some states it's actually required for every municipality, and in New York it's generally a good idea to keep a comprehensive plan updated. The last one was from 2012, which was a long time ago. A lot of things have changed, and this is while this process started several years ago and had a few delays due to COVID and such. We resumed at the end of last year. I've been meeting with all the committees because I had met with a lot of the committees during the process several years ago. The Environment Committee, the Committee for the Environment, Traffic Commission. I don't know if I reached the Flood Mitigation Committee, but I want to make sure I do that this time. And essentially, the comprehensive plan is a very broad-based document. It covers a lot of ground. So it's not going to be, it's a place which sets forth goals and objectives for the village, priorities. And there was a survey that was put out near the end of last year where we want to get a sense of the top priorities amongst residents and other folks in the village. And this, and not surprisingly, flooding is it came out on top, but there's also other issues as well: pedestrian safety, biking, affordable housing. And so I just want to touch briefly upon as I said, this covers a lot of ground. This document, it covers historic preservation, land use, environmental protection, transportation systems. And so what I've told people is, pick the chapter, if, it's a big document, so pick the chapter that may most interest you. I mean, of course, you should read all of it if you'd like, if you have the time, but pick the chapter that most interests you. And if you have any comments, please send them over to me. Chapter 5 is where this still needs to be updated. So there's going to be one more draft of it. The public comment period for this actually ended today. But I met with Tony and Trustee Leilani to get a pre-brief about some of the flood mitigation advisory committee's items that I've been seeing on the agendas, and so that's been very helpful. I just want to show you briefly. You can reference this document. There's at the very end of this document, there's a lot here. There's recommendations, and so far what I aim to do, this is not where it's at yet, but what I aim to do is get a sense of, and especially given the scope of a comprehensive plan, it's very broad based. I really just want to get a sense of all the different initiatives that are underway or being considered that address flood mitigation, and I'm going to categorize them. And I think on the agenda, Tony has already started listing some of those. Obviously the biggest project being the Army Corps of Engineers project that we all know about, but I want to make sure that the comprehensive plan communicates the kind of the full range of thinking that the village is doing as of right now, all the different components that are addressing flood mitigation. And so there's also regulatory actions. There's if you take a look at chapter 5 and the recommendations, you'll see. Now we're going to organize these a little better because right now they're just all listed, but I want to organize them into policy and regulatory actions, infrastructure investments, so it's a little clearer to people what are the different types of actions that are potentially will happen. And so it addresses quite a range of categories already. But there are regulatory actions that are identified in this as well, including creating a floodplain overlay district. And I think that's where Tony here listed the stormwater regulations, and then I think as far as housing initiatives for identifying any initiatives for if there's places where it makes sense to allow houses to exceed certain height limits to elevate, that sort of thing. And so ultimately, when the next draft of this is complete, ideally it'll be a better organized section, which at least presents to people, communicates to the people. I think it's the best place possible to communicate to residents and other folks what the full range of initiatives are, so that at a minimum people are aware of them. And then as far as being in a comprehensive plan, it becomes something that could influence the budgeting, grant seeking grants to get actions done. And so that's my brief overview of the comprehensive plan, and specifically how it relates to flood mitigation. So I do want to continue to listen on to you all as you continue your meeting, but if anybody has any questions, I'd like to answer them as well right now.
Well, Neil, I'd like to start just with a couple of things. One is, I don't know, and I'm open to comments here, but I am trying to reference all of the projects, and there's a lot of them at the end of the agenda every month. So you can look through those, obviously, and get a sense of that. You might want to speak to Jerry and Dan just to see what I missed, if anything. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing is, I am concerned that as we go forward, we have a lot of flooding now. As we implement these projects and reduce the flooding, I'm not sure how the policies and regulations will change, right? And if an area comes out of the FEMA map, is it as simple as that? Do the FEMA maps have to be upgraded? I think they are gonna have to. And is there a process over time for that to happen? So can you comment on that at all? So my concern is that we have a bad flooding situation now. As we do these projects,
areas should be coming out or getting less flooding. So how does that affect the regulations, if at all? And is there, should it?
Well, I think something we had talked about was, let's say 10 years from now is when you may see the impact of the Army Corps projects, and there'll be some impact. And one of the questions is, what is FEMA's process for doing the floodplain mapping and remapping floodplains? I think that's a question I would ask SLR, which is doing the watershed study, because they probably are on the top of those, those types of answers to those types of questions. I know, I don't know if there's if through this Army Corps, there's a special process whereby there will be doing some flood remapping or what, but I think there's a process that FEMA has for updating maps, and maybe Dan or Jerry might be more aware than I am. So that's one thing. And the second thing, as far as regulation goes, I think we had talked about I had identified the floodplain overlay district. Some communities have done as a way to put additional regulations in place within the floodplains, or even beyond the floodplains into the 500-year flood zone as opposed to 100-year. And that's something which is commonly done in a lot of towns to start to, well, it's not obviously, it's a regulation, so it's not gonna stop flooding in of itself, but it'll be able to provide some more tools in sort of, preventing development where it really shouldn't, where it could have a major impact in the floodplain. And so that's something that is right now a recommendation within the comprehensive plan to consider. But I think if Dan or if anybody happens to have a better answer to your first question, I'd like to hear that, because I'd like to know myself.
Go ahead, Tony.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah. Or I don't know if Jerry had something to add.
Jerry, no, so Neil, your recommendation is I'll reach out to SLR and see if they have a better idea on what FEMA's process is. But that being said, this flood overlay zone, is that going to be a recommendation?
Yeah, that's a recommendation to consider developing a floodplain overlay district. That's a recommendation right now in the comprehensive plan.
And just how I'm clueless as how that might work. I mean, would you just pick the worst areas and say those are, categorize them into worst to least flooding?
Well, it would probably need to be informed by either existing knowledge and or additional study. I know there's several studies that may be happening along the way, but yeah, ideally it would be informed so that by like I said, I think people know where flooding happens. People know where flooding happens is really bad. That's one place to start, but it should also be informed by any other study that's done to make sure that it is the right location, and then in terms of some of the, I think so there's some of the, I mean, essentially you're kind of reducing the potential for development, so you can scale that to being, limit development entirely in certain areas, and maybe scale down development in other places.
All right, so then I would assume that if you put it in as a recommendation, then committees can look at it, including ours, and then suggest that it be implemented or studied further. Is that where yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's essentially what the comp plan does. It sets things into motion. So it wouldn't have the solution. It wouldn't be very prescriptive. It wouldn't get into much detail about it. It may get into some detail, but generally it would make the recommendation And then in terms of the, the details of the regulations and moving ahead with that initiative is something that the committees can choose to take on and look at further, look at examples and move that process so that you're actually implementing the floodplain district,
All right, we have
floodplain
a,
overlay.
Yeah, Tony, I want to go back about the question about the flood maps. So I recall asking the Army Corps the question a couple of years ago. So their completion of a project does not in itself trigger new maps. I think because it's FEMA that develops the maps, not the Army Corps. I think there would have to be a request to either conduct a new flood insurance study or review the maps specifically as it may relate to Mamaroneck. Now, the other part of this is, if past is prologue, the current maps were adopted and enacted in 2007. The maps prior to that were from 1983. So that's roughly a 24-year time frame. So, if we look at 24 years from 2007, that means we're looking maybe early to mid next decade that there might be a new flood insurance study for the village, and we can certainly, see if there's any sort of time frame or what the horizon is that FEMA may have. We can. I think we have some contacts. We can find that out, but there may be some updates of that flood insurance study regardless, because Mamaroneck is not the only location in Westchester County where the Army Corps has been doing work. They've done a tremendous amount of work along the Sawmill. That's probably changed some of their assumptions, some of the existing data. When this project gets completed, that will also change some of the underlying data. And the fact is the difference between the technology they had in 2007 and 1983 was like the difference between the Wright brothers and the Apollo space program. But now the difference between the 2007 technology and what will probably be the technology 5 or 6 years from now will be the difference between the Apollo and the space shuttle. So it's the technology and the tools they have are so much more advanced now than they were 15, 20 years ago.
all right, well, thank you, Dan. So just going back to, so Bernie, you finish, and then Andrew, you'll be next on the questions, okay? Bernie, what was your question?
Well, I don't think you should reduce the map, so to speak, because there's going to be less flooding after I'm looking at it a completely different way, because I think the map should be expanded because of like examples, like if you're not even in the flood zone, like if you're on North Barry Avenue, you live on North Barry Avenue, and then you do a development. They want to do a development on North Barry Avenue, and they want to develop there. They want to put up 6 units. They want to take a single family home down. They want to put up 6 units. They're not in the flood zone, but their storm runoff, their storm water goes into the storm drains that goes down the hill and eventually goes into the Mamaroneck River. So to make the map smaller, I think we need to look towards the future. It has to be expanded. So every one storm drain that goes into the rivers, whether you're in a flood zone, you're not in a flood zone, or you were in a flood zone, and now you're not in a flood zone, it has to be, we have to think towards the future.
Good point. Good job. Well said.
And I think with a floodplain overlay regulations. Actually, what I think Andrew wanted to say something, but I will say, right, it says you can, you don't have to restrict it to the 100, the actual floodplain. You could restrict it, you can go beyond that in terms of regulations.
Hang on, Byron. So Andrew, you're on mute, Andrew. What?
Hey, Neil, good to see you again. It's been a while. I know you started when we were working with the Industrial Advisory Committee in the late 2018. So it's good to see you here. So in conjunction to what Bernie just said, and in line to what we were discussing at the end of the meeting last month, obviously there's certain areas of the village where development absolutely has to be scrutinized and vetted thoroughly. There are other parts of the area of the village, like the industrial area, which you and I worked on when you first came on board in the village. And I thank you, but you did take the time to meet with the committee, where actually right now, for example, if you have a parking lot, which is completely impervious, and somebody wants to build upon that, something that would sustain, whether it's residential, businesses, jobs, what have you, I think the comprehensive plan has to take that in consideration, that there are certain parts of the village where development, if done so, should be encouraged, not only be encouraged, but done so prudently, that retains the water, that doesn't obviously exacerbate the situation, although it can't exacerbate anymore because it's 98% impervious. There's 72 acres. So we started to discuss this actually at the conclusion of the last flood mitigation advisory committee meeting. But I think the comprehensive plan has to reflect that there are certain areas of the village that, if indeed development were to take place, done so, obviously practically and with wise, environmentally conscious approach. But for example, to get the equipment up higher to do so. So I think, for example, if it's 35 feet right now, allow that allowance. And I hate using that word, cookie cutter. Nothing in the village should be cookie cutter in terms of approach for all. So exactly like what Bernie said, because if you're not in a flood, if you're not in a FEMA map, and someone builds a 6-unit development on something which right now is 50% impervious, I get that. But if you're in an area where it's 100% already impervious and you want to build, it should be done so, and there should be some incentivization to do so. So I think, I don't know if your comprehensive plan can actually reflect that.
I mean, that's a very good point. I think that's something I think either it was Tony or Trustee Leilani had mentioned something like that in a conversation prior to that. But right, theoretically, if you have a currently a parking lot that's entirely you said the parking lot's entirely impervious, right? Impervious,
right?
And let's say you build something on there which has a stormwater catchment system or green roof or whatnot, and it could be stated that you're actually improving the condition of the thing. So that's a really good point.
Thank you.
I think that point needs to be I think that's an important point to mention in the comp plan. I think that needs to be, I think within that, I'll have to look at the language. But one other question I have for you, Andrew, is I know there was a zoning process that had started for the industrial area. Do you recall what some of these types of issues that have been discussed at that, or where they were heading?
Neil, we are actually, there's a resurrection of the Industrial Advisory Committee as we speak. I think in the weeks ahead, I think there's going to be some additional traction. We keep the point where there was a draft overlay, something that we can discuss offline with Jerry, Dan Sarnoff, whomever. We'd be happy to discuss that with you, because we actually made tremendous headway. But much like you, COVID hit and things kind of halted. But there's been a lot of discussions. There's been a lot of dialogue, productive dialogue especially with our new trustees that were elected. So I think that in the weeks and months ahead, I think there's going to be a lot more progress with that. And as I said, Jerry, our village manager, Dan Sarnoff, and our liaison, I'll be happy to communicate with you and share where we arrived at.
Well, Andrew, is there a simple way, like lots of people say the regulations in the floodplain aren't strict enough? how do we evaluate whether that statement's true or not? And what do we do, you know, how do we, should we try to improve it? Is that something we can put in at least as a question? I have a comment, so Peggy?
This committee about 2.5 years ago sent proposed legislation to the Board of Trustees that is circling in the ozone, where we recommended that all new construction, commercial construction done in a floodplain has to be built a minimum of 2 feet over the base flood elevation and built with pervious pavers. We never got any communication back, but maybe it's time to put that back as a suggestion in the comprehensive plan.
No, Tony, I did send over to the group some recommendations.
Right, you did. So
Hey,
Neil,
Tony, just so you know, I really, it was really hard to hear Peggy and Steve. I apologize. But
So just repeat what it is.
so I'll defer to what you guys are discussing. I'm sorry, I really could not hear. And it was hard to hear.
Peggy said that two or 3 years ago, the flood committee put together some recommended changes to the regulations and sent it to, I guess, the trustees, and it never got anyplace. Stephen had some recommendations which he circulated to FMAC. So maybe I don't want to put words in Neil's mouth and give you work to do that's not in your purview, but this maybe you could put in the recommendations would be as simple, not in your recommendations on the comprehensive plan, is to review the regulations with an eye toward tightening them up. And, you know, so is that a recommendation that you might make?
I mean, essentially, that's in a way, it's saying, you know, what the recommendation right now is to create a floodplain overlay district. I mean, essentially, in a way, you know, that proposal that the committee had provided to the BOT then is essentially it's not necessarily formally a floodplain overlay, but it's more stringent floodplain development regulations. So I think maybe I could, you know, rather than calling it a formal, I could call it a formal floodplain overlay district, but I think more simply stated, it could be also stated as a strengthening floodplain development regulations. So that covers more ground.
Yeah.
But Neil, if I can interject, I know what Peggy and Tony were just saying. One of the exceptions for commercial properties, now whether or not that's
Right.
industrial or other commercial parts of the village, one of the issues was, for example, I believe our code states that if there's a certain percentage of improvements made to a building, that automatically triggers the need to lift the building or raise the building, I should say, above that floodplain. And we were discussing, hey, listen, if you have a 15,000 square foot building, you have to replace the roof every 10 years by, XYZ, you're adding, now that's an improvement, but it's a necessity. That shouldn't count towards, quote unquote, that value, that mark where you have to raise a building. So I think exactly making things stricter is absolutely imperative here. But again, we have to be cognitive of, we have such a diverse between residential, recreational, and commercial use, not to hurt, certain population and individuals.
Andrew, let me just.
Just some context on that.
I think the idea of Neil putting in a recommendation to review and perhaps strengthen the regulations on stormwater in general and possibly use an overlay district would be something that I think is palatable for everybody. And then if the board agrees to go forward on that, we can look at the details on that regulation.
Yeah, but do we have a say what he puts in the comprehensive plan?
Right. The comprehensive plan.
Hang on.
Yeah, the comprehensive plan is merely a guiding document. So it's and generally, in a comprehensive plan, you want to be able to cover your ground in the right way. So, it's generally broad. The recommendations can be very broad to almost sound very generic, but you could say strengthen floodplain regulations where appropriate, because you want to balance also the fact that you don't, you want to be able to have economic activity in the right places. So, that it just.
I wanna be a little bit more specific. Like, I want roof retention systems along with the green roof, because quite frankly,
You're not gonna get that in the comprehensive
Oh.
plan.
okay, so that's what I'm asking.
No,
Is
you're
it gonna,
Neil gives a broad recommendation,
okay,
and then the board looks at, at the end of his document, there's gonna be, I don't know, 25 recommendations. Then we, as a group, I think will have to send an email to the board saying, we either would like to get further study on it, or here are 6 things we would like to add to the regulations to strengthen them. I don't think that he, and Neil, I don't think that's his role at the moment. That's just, am I wrong, Neil?
I mean, right, I mean, we can be, I mean, the comprehensive plan does get into some specifics in certain priority topics, and this is one of them, but, it has to be, I think, you could say, re-examining stormwater regulations to ensure that, the latest technology is being used for stormwater capture and things like that. And, so it would be stated very broadly. I mean, the comp plan doesn't, unless it's, the comp plan, again, is meant to be something that can get a process started. And so, getting the process started for looking at floodplain regulations, tightening regulations, looking at including within the regulations more where there's not enough, or including more green infrastructure type things, green roofs and that. I think, when you start getting into the comp plan is going to make a broad recommendation to go forth on that path, and then usually there will be a more detailed process where you're actually constructing the new regulations or the amended regulations, and that takes some more time. So we just merely want to have in the comp plan a thumb in the page saying this is something that this is something that we want to do, and we want to move forward with it. But the details in the comp plan, there's so many topics that are covered in the comp plan. You generally have to be pretty broad and just put a placeholder that this is something that needs to be looked at and examined and implemented further.
All right, so at the moment, our recommendation from the FMNC is that if you can, we would like to see strengthened floodplain regulations, further review needed. Okay, all right. What other big topics does FMAC have that we want to make sure gets in the plan? Anybody? So Neil, you mentioned infrastructure, right?
Right.
So from my perspective on infrastructure, I know our village is doing a lot with stormwater drains, right?
Right.
So do you have anything in there on stormwater drains?
Yeah, when in the comp plan, we anything that's already, for the most part, the comp plan has anything that's underway, we have that listed as, accomplishments, things that are underway, the stormwater, the sewer system, relining, this and that, it acknowledges, it has anything that's already in progress, it captures. Right now is I think, with respect to specifically the flood mitigation advisory committee, I know there are a number of concepts and ideas that are on the agendas that I've been kind of looking at over the time. And I think out of those items, what do you think are the ones that have that are the most important? Do you feel are the most important? And that's a starting point for including the comprehensive plan. If certain things are just ideas which you don't know sure how they will go, it's
So I mean,
you know.
all right, so if you can, so I'm now backing up on infrastructure to say overall, I think that our committee has been saying, at least for a year, that, you know, we really believe that a holistic floodplain watershed approach is what's needed. The mayor and the board termed it parallel projects. And so
Mhm.
this list is kind of a watershed approach, floodplain, you know, floodplain and watershed parallel projects.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if we had to choose which projects are the most important, I mean, it seems to me like the Army Corps project, which is in progress, so we don't really have to recommend that.
Right,
Um,
right.
The Mamaroneck Dam and Reservoir is front and center, and so we
Right.
had a presentation last night. I don't know if you were privy to it, but
I downloaded the study that they did, so, but I wasn't at the meeting.
so they have, I think, 3 recommendations.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, so what do we want to, so to me, that's a primary way to control flooding in the village. So in the comprehensive plan, I guess committee, would you want to say, ask Neil if he could put that in as a priority infrastructure project?
Is it that, Tony, or is it parallel mitigation as something broad in the,
You know, I started with sewers and I'm kind of backing up, so yeah,
yeah,
So could it be something as simple as saying,
list of all the items that we potentially could do to, under the umbrella of parallel?
what about something as, you know, maybe benign as implementing projects that complement and enhance the benefits of the flood mitigation of the Army Corps project, something to that effect.
Right, and that's something that the comp plan already says. And in fact, the fact that this study, the Mamaroneck Dam and Reservoir study was done, I downloaded it and I wanted to make sure that the fact that it was done is reflected in the comprehensive plan. But I know there's alternatives they came up with, but you know, the comp plan doesn't have to, you know, unless there was a choice already made. It's something that should be mentioned in the comp plan.
No,
you know, I think that I would like to see, this is me, and then we'll ask me. Start with a watershed approach, parallel projects, you know, to the Army Corps project. And you can then list everything that I have in this agenda and maybe chat with Jerry and Dan.
Yeah.
To anything that we've missed, okay?
Okay.
Then, I mean, do we want to then suggest priority projects or a sequencing of projects? So you could, so a thought would be, okay, priority projects, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The dam and reservoirs is, you know, front and center. Everybody's talking about
But
that.
Tony, you
Yeah.
might understand, the dam project is just the dam. There's a separate project of dredging behind the dam going out. to
So
the
dam and
Saxon
reservoir,
Woods.
that's,
So, but the dam project that was presented last night, and Jerry just confirmed it, is just the dam.
right, but SLR is doing
That needs to be
dam.
put as a separate priority.
So I think, Neil, you know, priority projects, dam and reservoir, right?
I'm writing this down. Yeah.
And maybe 21st century infrastructure, you know, valves, automatic valves, that type of thing. So committee, what are our other top flood control projects? Dan, Dave.
What I'm hearing is that if something's in the plan as a priority, for instance, the watershed, the parallel, it's then incumbent upon us to say, we're the committee who looks at the comprehensive plan with an eye toward flood mitigation. This item is there. Here's the meat we want to put on it. Here's how we want to implement it. Here are the recommendations that we make. We suggest to make it work. Here's what we want to take to the board. As long as it's in there as a general topic, so that we can go and put our hooks into it, so that we can be the ones to implement it. I think then the task of the comprehensive plan is done what we needed to do for us.
And the other,
And Neil, we also have the hazard mitigation plan that
Right.
was adopted in 2021.
Yeah, I took a lot of those, and those are included within the comp plan right now. I just may want to, I know one or two things have already been implemented. I can talk to you about that later, just to figure out find out which ones have been implemented.
Yeah, I mean, and before long, we're gonna start the process of the next hazard mitigation plan. That's
Okay.
only a 5-year plan, so I don't know if there's something maybe wanna say, in the context of preparing the next hazard mitigation plan, we should be looking at A, B, and C or something like that.
But I think that was well stated that before you spoke, Dan, that was well stated the way, right, it's incumbent upon the flood mitigation to kind of to get behind something and implement it or find the ways to, whatever it needs to get something implemented.
All right, Jerry?
So, maybe you know, or maybe you don't know, but how we feel as a staff is we don't have a choice, right? We have to do everything all at once.
Right.
Because we can't really, because of a lot of things haven't been done in the past, we are now at a point where I have to do everything all at once, okay? And that's how I feel every day. Everything has to happen all at once. We do the dam, which we had our report last night, thank God. And then it's the Army Corps, it's our dredging, it's buying equipment, it's preparing for maintenance after the Army Corps is done. We're doing that all at once. But I think it's probably the responsibility of the Flood Mitigation Committee to create that list, like David said, of goals and objectives. So they're in that plan. So those are the things that the Flood Mitigation Committee feels strongly should be part of the comprehensive plan for the future of the village. But I can tell you, because if you ask me, I have to do everything all at once. I have no choice. Okay, we can't go through what we went through in 2021. I have to do everything all at once. But that's not future planning. I'm not planning for the future. I'm working for today, and I'm working for next year, the year after that, and the year after that. And then hopefully in year 4, we have accomplished what we need to accomplish. So I'm the wrong person, unfortunately. I'm talking, but I'm the wrong person to comment on what the comprehensive plan should include. But I want to make sure that the Flood Mitigation Committee, Advisory Committee, includes everything that they're comfortable or that they want to include as goals and objectives in this comprehensive plan.
I feel that part of that plan has to include what we were just talking about. New laws for new development. We can't just keep putting up buildings everywhere and saying, oh, it'll be fine. We can't keep building on our rivers. We can't keep paving over everything. It's got to be, our laws have to change. Our building laws have to be updated to include it.
If I can expand on Patty, I'm not thinking about that. I'm not worried about that. I'm not the person who creates policy around here, right? So I don't do that kind of stuff. I just take care of what has to get done, and I take care of what needs to get done. But you're right, that has to be included.
It has to be.
But
So,
it's not a priority for me. It has to be a priority collectively for the year. Right?
One thing I did want to mention is kind of almost the opposite of what everybody's talking about. There were several houses that haven't came back yet, which are on the rivers. One right next to the Winfield Bridge,
That's right.
the one on Otter Creek, the one all the way by Barry Avenue.
And the Plaza and Madison.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there should be, part of the comprehensive plan did say, recommend about properties and like next to, and I think properties like this, we should explore if we could just unhouse them, knock down the house, make it
Green space.
exactly. And what happened was with the auto dealership on Route 1, we didn't even know that was happening. That would have been a great space. And it is closer to the, river, to the Otter Creek there. It really shouldn't have ever been, it should have been kept a green space. So I think that's something that we want to maybe look more into. Like, I don't know if those houses are for sale, those properties are for sale, if they've been sold, if they're never gonna come back, but I think,
All different scenarios.
Yeah.
All different scenarios, foreclosure, all that kind of stuff.
yeah, but those are things that, if it's foreclosure on it, the town should buy it.
Well, we have to look at those commercial properties that are sitting on the river there as well.
Yeah, well, these are being
Right.
used, if properties are being used, it's one thing, the properties aren't being used anymore.
Isn't there just like one?
Yeah, but who pays for them?
The town.
The village.
So there's a lot of single ideas, if we can go back to the broad scope, there's a
Right.
lot of single ideas that are on this committee that should be potentially provided to Neil so that he can put them into
Yeah.
some kind of a list, some
Yeah,
kind of a
that
structure.
is on the comprehensive plan, but I don't think it's in here talked about or.
So, Stephen.
Yeah.
I think that if we looked at repetitive loss properties, which I think is really. That I think what you're talking about is all these properties that are repetitive loss. I think we really need to look at them in a different way. I think that somehow we need to get that into the comprehensive plan. To say, no, it's not okay for this property at the end of Maple to flood again and again. So can we look at like on Nostrand and what's left?
Elevated.
Right? Take it, make some green space, let's raise the houses up, let's do something creative. So Neil, how can we put this, what can you put in as a recommendation for these repetitive loss properties with some multiple concept of green space, new housing, modern housing? How would you frame something like that?
Right, well, right now, the recommendation reads to develop strategies to acquire private lands. For that are flooded repeatedly next to the Sheldrake River for open space and flood mitigation purposes. So it talks about acquiring properties, it mentions open space and flood mitigation purposes. And I guess that can go, and to that extent, it seems to, the concept, the kind of ideas you have it paves the way for possibly for the types of things you're talking about coming up with a different way of doing something with those proproperties.
Well,
And there are references in our hazard mitigation plan to that as well.
Right, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Neil, can you be
Yeah.
more specific? Rather than just saying, how about strategies for, repetitive loss properties? And then even if you bullet pointed to say, green space, acquisition of land for green spaces, raising houses, modern, I don't know, some creative housing approaches or something like that. Can you be a little more specific?
Well, I guess our question is, so are these properties they're often flooded over, and are you saying you still want to be able to build something on them, but or do you want to leave them as green space or some sort of thing?
I think there's every space is different, but
Right.
every street is different, but some
Right.
streets, if it's right along the river, you could say, okay, there's 4 houses along the river, maybe we purchased the land, and then across the street, we changed the zoning to make it a little more dense and higher up, right? But I think that open-minded way of looking at it, that creative approach, if that was in the plan, that's how we start, and then we have to find money to do it. No, I got a few questions. Kate?
I could just interject a comment here. So I'm on the committee for the environment, and we have a subcommittee for open space. So we've put together a list of, sites that we want to, some of them are village owned, what have you, but to upgrade them, make them better environmentally and so on and so forth. But we've also identified a few sites that, I don't know how we proceed, we have to figure that out. But for example, here's just a simple example. If you think about where A&P used to be, where North Shore Farms is, north of that area is a large parking lot, which borders the Mamaroneck River. That parking lot is owned by a corporation that owns the big building on Mamaroneck Avenue. So I've identified that, and what you would have to do there would either be to buy it or to do some kind of a conservation easement where you approach that corporation to say, look, this is parking, let's do something like what Tony and I proposed for Columbus Park. Lower it, so it's more, because it's floodplain, but they're using it as parking, lower it, put pavers in and have part of it be dedicated as parkland. You know, you have to do a financial transaction. Because what happens, you know, I used to live in Larchmont, and this was something that would happen, is the next thing that'll happen is that the owners of that property will put together a proposal to build on it. You know, it's a huge empty space. And then you're chasing it and it's too late to do anything about it. So, you know, I can share with you what we've put together. Or here's another example. The Hess station, okay, on Jefferson, right at the corner there. The back half of that station is a big piece of land that borders the river. It's just dilapidated, you know, garbage strewn space now. But we want to approach that owners of that company to talk about a conservation easement so that that piece of land there can be parkland, can be floodable, can be publicly accessible space, because God help us if they figure out a way to put a building on it. That's the point, that there's a lot of land there, but you know, it's really inventorying it, figuring out where it is and making a plan to get in front of it before it's too late and it ends up in front of the planning board or the coastal zone management, and it's just about permitting it. And if they're in their rights, they're going to go ahead and do it like they did on that piece of land you're talking about. So that's my 2 cents.
When she says Hess station, I don't know what she's talking about.
I know. We all know that. Yeah. Well, but
A number of things addressed in what we're talking about. Severe repetitive loss, and Jerry will tell you the same thing. Dan, I'm sure you will as well. You can't find out. It is confidential information, at least for residences. So you're not going to be able to figure out exactly what that is.
Yeah, I mean, we've been able to get the severe repetitive loss list, but we are not allowed to share that information. The file is emailed to us with a big, warning sign that they're going to send me to federal jail if I share that information.
Second, in terms of elevating our homes, when I went to look for a grant to either elevate or to get purchased, they base the purchase of homes in flood areas based on the state value of real estate. And I will tell you, as a realtor, you're going to get pennies on the dollar down here. It's not an option. The best option for anyone who is in a floodplain is to apply for an HMDG grant where the government will give you a portion of the cost to raise your house. Now, my house cost $500,000 to raise, and I got $188,000. The rest was on me. So there aren't going to be that many people in the village, unfortunately, who are going to be able to foot those kinds of prices. But that's your best game, is getting those grants to raise homes, and that should be in the comprehensive plan so that people remember that it's there and it's an option.
I'm not convinced that the comprehensive plan should be at this level of detail. The comprehensive plan should be big picture, should be forest, so that then we can go in and identify the trees and figure out which ones that we want to spend time on. But if something that someone's interested in is not, you can't find it in the plan in a more forest way. If it's so, then you can't come back and say, it's in the plan, I want to implement it. So you've got to make sure that the general topic, the general item, whether it's the industrial area with an overlay that encourages more pervious, et cetera, et cetera. As long as it's there in a generic way, then we as a committee can have these discussions and pinpoint specific topics, specific areas, specific legislation.
Okay, so let me say then, at the moment, what I think we're asking Neil to do is in your recommendation section, so far, we've talked about putting in the watersheds of parallel projects, right? And then you're gonna list the ones that are either in progress or pending. You're gonna say a definite regulation review with an eye towards strengthening and or overlay zones for all the flood areas and maybe even other areas where the flood waters go from, because, it's been pointed out recently that from the hills, the water goes down into the valleys, and so maybe we need to take that into consideration. Talking about strategies for properties that are frequently flooded, maybe creative strategies, and maybe there you can put property acquisitions, open space easements, creative housing solutions, something like that, house raising. Okay, so those are the things I think we've covered so far. Okay, so are there other board topics we want to add? Barney, what do we?
I'm in agreement with Dave that the comprehensive plan is just the comprehensive plan, and then we have to narrow everything down and detail everything. And not that the houses that are going to get condemned aren't important to make them turn into green space, but I think, what Kate says, that they're going to come in and build, which I'm not completely against them doing, because they're going to, if they do it the right way, which is you go by the county guidelines for stormwater management, and then we have our own local laws, and that's what I've been trying to say. We have our own local laws that have roof retention systems, bioswales, pavers that absorb all the water, where your property's holding that water for a long time. And we're not gonna stop the building, gonna keep happening. And I think that's one of the big priorities right now. But we have to be the ones to detail all this stuff.
Not the
But
plan.
tonight, I'm just trying to make sure that what our big topics are in his plan. That's my mission.
Come up with the
Bernie's
Yeah.
agreeing.
Yeah, no.
I think part of the wording, it should be also, not only new building, but substantial improvements, because,
On the regulations.
yeah.
All right, so Neil,
Building
on the
codes.
regulation review, new construction and renovations, okay?
By regulations, are we talking building code as well? If not, put that in there.
Yeah, but I'd like to add on to the existing building codes.
Yeah.
And add on-
Yeah, but that-
I'm not saying that's. All I'm saying tonight is I want us to have given Neil
Okay.
our big points.
Okay, all right.
That when we take the comprehensive plan and a month or 2 months from now, we say, oh crap, we didn't put that in, right? So that's my, so I think that's what I have had in my head. So I'm saying right now, does anybody have any other big topics that we don't have in here?
Why don't we go through the list that we already have here? Because we have already mentioned what we want. And it's detailed here.
Here's another one, enforcement of existing regulations. Like the floaters.
Right,
It's there, we've been talking about it since I've been here. And, things, there's regulations on the books, they need to be enforced.
All right, so Neil, under the regulations, can you maybe have a topic of revised regulations for new properties and renovations, and then have existing regulation enforcement as a topic, right? Or as a kind of a heading, a bullet point. Because we've been talking about that forever.
Tell me just a little bit more about that. Existing regulation enforcement.
Under regulations, right? So you're gonna have a regulation review for enhancement for new properties and renovations.
Mhm.
And existing and new regulations to review enforcement mechanisms that are effective, right?
They're on the books.
That they're on the books and they get enforced,
Yeah.
right, yeah. Because we have stuff that's on the books now that we think doesn't get enforced.
Right.
All right, so Elsie's thought was to review all of these things. And he's gonna put all of these in pretty much, Elsa. I guess the other topic, though, that maybe we should just touch on having is that we virtually never talk about sound shore flooding, right? And I don't know, this is a huge other topic. I mean, we got in Sandy, right? We got fairly badly hit in Sandy. And I think we should have it in the comp plan that somehow we look at that area with an eye toward maybe doing a study. I mean, the whole of New York City's, Long Island is, they're all doing studies of.
Tony, you talking about Sound Shore or the park itself, just?
No, the whole, anything along Long Island Sound, right? Because we get to talk riverine.
But, when Greg was here,
Committee?
did you guys provide, wasn't there a section that you and Greg worked on regarding Sound Shore? Not impact, but vulnerability? You remember that? I remember it. It was. Yeah, let's see what he has.
Yeah, I have it in here someplace, I think.
Number 14 is Sound Shore flooding.
Number 14, Neil, but I think we should make that its own topic because that's really a big area. And, we're always so consumed with riverine flooding that we never really focus on that. And, in general, our riverine flooding is more frequent.
But Tony, you're trying to talk about your coastal flooding and the short and long-term impacts of sea level rise?
Yeah, I mean, I just have item 14 is sound shore flooding. So, what's happening now and, and I think, were you referring to Neil? Who was our previous planner?
Greg, he's coming back April 17th.
To be our planner again?
Yeah, to be our planner.
Oh, really?
What's his last name?
So Neil, Greg Cutler's coming back April 17th.
Oh, that's interesting.
I put his arm
Like a resounding.
What I'm trying to reference is the 2080, we were going off of the projections, the sea level rise of 2080.
He had a couple of, he had like 3
Correct,
time frames in there.
that's right. That's what, do you still have that stuff, Neil? That is easily referenced or?
Can you repeat what stuff is that you're talking about?
2080, 2080, year 2080 sea level rise projection.
Yeah. I have a lot of Greg's reports that he had done back when he did a sea level rise presentation. I have all that. Yeah, that's part of. I incorporate some of that in the comp plan.
So Neil, I think as one of our major recommendations with sound shore flooding is to look at existing vulnerabilities and then projected vulnerabilities with the predicted sea level rises, right? Just something as simple as that.
Yeah.
And then that will, again, that will generate, as Dave says, we can go back and focus.
Something
on
to put our hooks in. Something to put our hooks in.
Yeah.
That has been there.
Yeah.
Then we can hook onto it.
So, I mean, as I don't know the name of the woman who's talking about this list, but I have been looking at this list, on the agenda for a while, and it seems like these have been on your list for a while, and so we're. I know some of these sound familiar. Like I think some of them are already happening. I think, but I guess the ones that obviously the USAC, the dam study, the watershed study. What other items? And you just talked about Sound Shore flooding, and I do find I think there's places in the comp plan where things like this would fit in already within the chapter because we talk about sea level rise in some of the recommendations. But any other ones in here that on this list that stand out as well? I know a lot of them looks like they're already being, okay, that I have reflected in here, the waiver of initiatives, but yeah, so what are some other initiatives that I know there's the Columbus Park presentation you had given to the board. I think that's something that you wanted to float to the Army Corps. Has that been gained any traction?
Well, the Army Corps, so under tweaks, right? And I don't see it tweaks. This is another item.
Oh, Tony has extra copies to see that. If you...
Okay, give me that. So Neil, some of your question marks, some of your question marks, we've been dealing with some of your questions, we have,
Peggy?
I can give you information on some of your question marks.
Okay.
Put in during this time
Susan, I
of
think.
the committee, I could provide that.
Sure, that would be helpful. That would be helpful. Thanks.
Lawrence Park, I can provide that information.
Okay, thanks. All
Those
right.
are ongoing now, Neil.
Right. Okay, and I think that's great. I can talk off with you later about that.
Yeah, and then Neil tweaks, so the Army Corps has agreed to do a H8 study of the Mamaroneck River from the Thruway Bridge to the dam and reservoir, and look at that and include in that review the channel and the road to nowhere and Glendale, the bridge. What was the
Okay.
bridge? So they've agreed to look at that.
Okay.
They've agreed to.
You ain't never seen Peggy that often.
The Kate and Tony and committee open channel review, right? But for Columbus Park, they've agreed that funding that's not spent on one area can move to another area.
Mhm.
I think those were the tweets they agreed to.
Okay.
So that brings me to a question though, that for us to really implement the Columbus Park, permeable parking, we might need more parking in the village, right? So.
Well, one thing to remember though, that, the parking lot isn't getting filled up anymore.
Yeah.
And the back parking lot, there's never anybody in.
Well, I agree to back park, but I've been taking, since we had our last meeting, I've been going by there pretty regularly. And there's a lot of days, where there's a lot of cars.
There's a lot, but it's not, it used to be filled up, and the back lot used to be filled up. And also, I mean, I don't know what the railroad's like, the parking along.
So Stephen, those are 5 spots because everyone's stay close to the train.
Yeah, I mean, at the rail, I mean, along the, further down a little bit.
Bishop.
Oh, Bishop.
And Bishop, yeah, I mean, is that parking? Yeah, it's empty, so there is, the parking is there. So I think,
We designed it, if you recall, I don't have it with me, but the reduction, the amount of parking spaces was almost the same or very little reduced.
By putting in the open.
I mean, that can be designed,
Going from a closed culvert. to-
and it's also kind of your problem, isn't it? I mean,
Well, it's gonna be our problem if at some point. Say the Army Corps says yes.
Yeah.
But then we realize there's not enough commuter parking, it's gonna put a stall to it. So I'm thinking, should Neil be maybe looking at alternatives?
No,
No.
because of the way work has changed, I don't think that's going to be a problem in the future. I don't think. Bishop's totally empty, always, it has been since the pandemic. Small Jeff lot has been totally empty. I just had to create that, make that a hybrid lot. Because we weren't getting enough 12-hour parking spots in the air. The 12-hour parking spots were filling up to a point where people were looking for 12-hour spots instead of permit parking. Railroad RR parking bags, parking stickers. And if we can gain back 50% of what the open culvert project replaces, we should be in good shape. I don't have a problem with that. And I can make up the loss over time in revenue by doing other things, like putting meters in the 500 to 800 block of Mamaroneck Avenue, those kinds of things. So I'm not too worried about that.
it'd be appreciated if you do have some more daily parking.
Yeah, so I have it.
All right,
Yeah, we'll make it.
all right. I'll tell my daughter. to do that.
Good.
All right, I want to try to wrap this up. So Dave. go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is a wrap up comment because I recall over the years, either of two things might happen. Either someone would bring up something and they'd say, well, we can't talk about that. It's not in the comprehensive plan.
He's dead on correct.
Okay, or alternatively, it's in the comprehensive plan. What are you guys doing about it?
Yeah, only former trustees talk like he does. And I'm one of them also.
Yeah,
From a
so
long time
that's,
ago. You're right, he's right.
the simple of it is we've got to make sure, for the purposes of this committee, we don't fall into either trap.
Yeah.
There are things there that we can't do anything about and don't want to do. That's unlikely. But more importantly, there isn't things that aren't there that we do want to do. And then when we try to do them and say, look, guys, it's not in the comprehensive plan, we've got to pay attention to that plan. And then we can't, then we're, right?
Yep.
Is there anything that fits any,
Dead on.
particularly the omission?
Right, so that's what, is there anything else we want to have Neil put in?
That's a lot.
Neil, when can you send us a new, a revised draft?
Enough for us to work on for a few years.
Let me look at my calendar.
The only way to get around that is to say plus other items.
I mean, I will say, I mean, a lot of things, the comprehensive plan isn't, it's, there are plenty of actions that are done in towns that aren't in the comprehensive plan that are good ideas. They just weren't even contemplated during the comprehensive plan process. So, just to say that the comprehensive plan isn't law, it's guiding policy, but it is helpful to include in the comprehensive plan. If something's not, that's interesting what the Committee for Environment's doing. Their concept of looking at private properties and conservation easements is an interesting idea. It doesn't come from a comp plan because the comp plan was from 2012 at the time, but it's certainly an interesting initiative and they're moving with it. But at the same time, right, having it in the comp plan, especially for longevity in terms of, sometimes the composition of committees changes. I guess they all change at certain time periods. And so there is some longevity in a concept that should be implemented, regardless of who is on the committee. So real quick with the project schedule, the next draft of the it's going to be on the 10th, April 10th is the revised comprehensive plan. Let me Tony, I'll send you the full schedule I have here, just so you have it and you could share with the committee. I'll send it to you tomorrow. I'll send you a link to the schedule I'm working with.
My great grandma.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
how do we have Neil at the April 10th meeting? Do we have him in a work session or do we have him presentation 8 o'clock?
Typically, we've had Neil at the work sessions,
Okay.
but
Right.
ultimately, that's if the board wants him at the regular meeting, we do it at the regular meeting, but
So
I prefer the session.
work session is typically prohibited from input, mayor bends the rules a little bit sometimes, but that's my question. I'll talk to Tom and see what he says. But Neil, you'll be available that night, no matter whether it's 5:15 or 8 o'clock, right?
So that's the April 10th, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you and Dan about, because I guess what would be, because really I have a BOT work session proposed in May because we're going to be getting comments from the planning board and the county back, and that's when I had in mind that we would have a work session. I mean, if I'll send the calendar again to you and Jerry, because I just want to make sure that the timing of these work sessions is the best time.
So the problem that I want to try to avoid is to, if you're going to present the draft to the board of trustees and only the board of trustees are going to comment on it, that's fine if that's what the mayor's plan is, if that's what he envisions. But if the public's going to comment on it, we can't get, we just don't have we don't do public during the work session. Correct. So it's
Right,
a-
right.
Yeah.
And that's the question I had is whether the BOT wanted to have, I thought right now I have on the calendar, May 8th as a potential BOT work session for having the BOT providing comment as well as responding to the comments that the planning board or the county planning agency has submitted.
Yeah, and Jerry, if Neil was,
So Dan, one thing, April 10th is right in the middle of our budget season.
yes,
And
it is.
our trustees are gonna be focused on the budget and the budget workshops. And maybe not necessarily on Neil's comprehensive plan. So I wanna make sure that, they have the capacity to be able to get
Bless
what's
you.
done and then move on to the comp plan. So the May date, Neil, is fine.
Yeah.
For the board, but if he's gonna present the draft on April 10th, I have to see if the mayor wants public comment.
Yeah, that's where that's the date where I have my calendar just to submit the draft because and then once the draft is submitted, it may be referred, it says you can to refer, give it time because the county needs 30 days. So what I proposed was submitting the draft to the BOT on the 10th. And then after that, it being referred to the planning board and the county planning agency. And then after 30 days would be the May 8th BOT work session. So that would bring in BOT would be able to provide comments on the comp plan as well as any comments on the comments received from the planning board and the county.
Yeah, speaking of the village board, trustee Young actually has raised his hand. I think he may have a question or a comment.
Well, look at that.
So,
Louis.
No, Jerry addressed it. The April 10th is too soon. It's budget time. You want to wait till May. That's my feeling, but I'll bet you'll be the same way.
Nope, you're correct, Louis.
Okay.
All right, that's all. You did it without my input. So talk to you later.
Sorry to ignore you.
So sorry, I should have been sharing my screen at the time when I was talking about it. Because I do have I do have the 10th as so just merely submitting the comp plan, referring to the planning board, referring to the county agency. They need 30 days. And then May 8th would be, or around May 8th would be the next BOT work session.
So flood chair Tony, he has to get him the stuff by April 10th.
Well, as long as you want to make it public, because I don't want it to be up to make it public, right? Because otherwise that when I gotta share it with everybody.
But regardless, it has to be, regardless.
I have to have it from you guys by that date. So you
By
can-
May 8th.
Yeah, yep, May,
April 10th.
April 10th. Oh, you said May 8th. April 8th is good too.
Well, so public comments technically would do today, public comments.
Earlier.
So we received, we did receive, because of the extension, thankfully, we received none, but now we have a body of comments have to go through. I have now, my next step is to take the public comments and as well as things I've learned from the flood mitigation committee and revise the existing comp plan that I have draft. And so ideally, the one that I produce on April 10th will have, reflect our discussion we had today. As far as, opportunity, I guess the question is, opportunity to comment on that. I guess that's something the BOT, the Board of Trustees could certainly do. As they are liaisons to the committees in the May 8th meeting that I'm proposing for a BOT work session.
In May.
As long as your list is complete tonight, then he's ready to go.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, hopefully he gets, all right. Yeah, okay, so.
So do we want to conclude something on the whole, not only the commercial side, but helping people out with some of these issues from raising a house to buying pumps? I mean, is that something we should have in the comprehensive plan? The fund, because some people can't
That's a
afford
good
this stuff.
question.
Because I know we talked about that and we're waiting for New York State to happen. it isn't, but we could also provide some of those funds also. Is that something that we want to
Well,
have? in the
Providing funds or providing information?
Funds.
so Neil, the question that Stephen has is
Where are
talked
you?
about, we've talked about how can we help our
You have a
residents
bonus.
who do get flooded in various ways, and you know,
Mhm.
the people that try to raise their houses, as Peggy explained, always have a financial problem.
Right.
When Stephen and I talked about it a year ago, we found that like counties out in, I don't know, in Colorado, they work on getting grants and then they help their communities that way. They have lots of different programs. So the question is, on a high level, as a high level topic,
Mhm.
is there a way that we should put something in the comp plan that the village works with, I'm just winging it here totally, works with committees and government bodies to
Find and provide funds.
find and provide funds for flood mitigation.
Yeah, I would avoid, something like direct financial assistance, because that's venturing into gift of funds territory, and that's not a.
No, so Neil, I think Tony's talking about what they do in Jersey with the Blue Acres.
I'm sorry, say about Jersey, say it
You
again.
know what, in Jersey about the Blue Acres grant programs?
Right, yeah,
I think that's what Tony's talking about,
okay,
that we as a village work with the state.
Oh, okay.
To try to get some Blue Acres type money, can't call it Blue Acres because Jersey has. that.
right,
But that type of money, Blue Acres is purchasing land
right.
along flooded riverine lakes types of situations where it stayed as open space. State funding.
We could put into the plan that the village will work on assisting getting grants for people who are interested in purchases, which aren't gonna happen, but you can put it in, or elevations. And leave
What-
it simple and loose like that.
What about how, kind of phrasing it, that the village will work on initiatives with the federal, state and county on, so Neil, the village will work on initiatives with federal, state and local governments to assist flooded properties or
Flood prone residents.
flood-prone housing or flood-prone property owners on mitigation techniques or something.
Mitigation, finding financing for mitigation?
No, on mitigation strategies. Does that sound all right?
I have a sheet that had it.
Excuse me?
I had that sheet that I made up that had all that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I think I have to look back in the text of the chapter.
Who's got his hand?
Yeah, I think that's kind of referenced in our,
I know, it's just our.
the mitigation.
Is it in the hazard mitigation plan, Dan?
I think so. It talks about the various programs that are out there.
Right.
HMGP, FMA, BRIC, all that stuff. I don't have it in front of me, but it's.
Yeah, here I actually, so I'm looking right now at, that does sound familiar, because I think, just to be sure, let me, I do have in here in the comp plan, outreach to provide options to mitigation.
No, but it helps, they would help serve it.
Yeah,
Is that in your recommendations, Neil?
yeah, I have, let me, put this on the screen here. I can get this on the screen here. I know it may also be in another location, but it says here, the village, oh, that's the village has numerous facilities. Well, let me, rather than spending time clicking through here, I'm gonna, that sounds very familiar, but, I think at the same time, it may be in another part, because it could be something that's already happening. So let me, but I think the gist of what you're looking for is basically providing support and linking, linking up with federal, state, and county to help residents with whatever they need in terms of flood assistance. And is getting the information out there an issue, or is it more just, getting the funding?
It's both. It could be
Yeah.
both, because some people don't know and some people don't know where to look. And so it could be both.
Okay.
Maybe develop a program or review program.
Yeah.
Review
Yeah.
and develop program.
Neil, if you want, I can share our annex to the mitigation plan.
Yeah, I have that. That was very helpful when I because I think that's where exactly why it sounds so familiar,
Yes.
because I think it's in there. I have that annex. That was very helpful in composing part of the section, because it had a lot of the actions they're undertaking. So yeah, thanks. I'll look at that. I'll look at
Yeah,
the
I mean, I
alternative.
pulled it up, and I can just share my screen with.
Oh yeah, sure. If you're gonna share your screen, that's good too. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So everybody, let's do this. Let's take a 5-minute break.
No, let's keep
We
going.
should just keep going, so maybe.
3.5-minute break. And then
All right, so then we're gonna just do Kate's presentation, then we can go home, right? Because we're not gonna be trying to do it.
We can't.
Oh, I do want to see Kate's presentation too. So
Yes, you will get your time in 3 minutes. No,
Tony
in,
needs a 3-minute break.
3 minutes.
yes.
Somebody must tell my brain. I take another.
Read the notes from the last meeting.
yes, that's what it is. That's where I see it, Dan. Right, that conduct outreach.
Oh, that's. It's great. They're making it narrower, but did you see today's?
And it's the number one project in our.
Because you see, if we put a bike lane, it's gonna be even narrower.
No.
we're going over that.
Oh.
Underneath.
Oh,
Definitely.
Bike lane, I walk there all the
who is
time.
doing this? Who is doing this? When is this doing this?
State.
When?
Now.
They're doing it.
You know Harbor Island?
Oh, God,
That bridge.
yeah.
Did you see the pictures I sent?
I mean, you talk about it's true, you know. I mean, last minute that you didn't send to me on time.
No.
Is that the email that you keep forgetting me?
He would never.
And that he doesn't really care about me? But he said, you know what, you're an
That was a-
afterthought.
You're no. I see.
No, you know what?
Compliment.
I looked at it and I said, you know what, Bernie, I'm going back to bed. Because this is the
No,
second
that was a
time.
compliment.
No,
That
it's
was
the
a
second
compliment.
time.
Clara was not in the.
Yes, it was. I don't know what time the final meeting ended, but
I was
It's the one with the sides.
37.
that's
And
when-
they, I had to go to bed.
Where's your,
They,
Even started, you think we're gonna be able to fix?
now we can get to the agenda.
they're making it short.
Lonnie, what time did you guys get done?
What time do you think, Peggy?
I have no idea.
If I home, I think it was close to midnight.
11:53 was when it ended. last night.
I'm done.
Think,
No,
I think.
they kept, well, yeah, the public comment, but then they kept commenting afterwards. Every,
That recommendation and it's in the comp plan that
So I think, most of the stuff that I think that been discussed in general tonight was
It's not on
included.
the.
right. That's what I felt. I felt there are pieces, they're all, it's there. there just needs to be a place where there's just a little bit more information added based on what I hear today.
no, I'm not going anywhere. Like something is gonna be like.
Did you already do the traffic signal elevation?
No.
Because it's like you want
applied for a
transparency, we
grant
try to give you transparency.
For the first intersection,
Okay.
at the Mamaroneck Halsted Union.
It's
I ran-
really, it's either
Just learned that.
you and everybody else.
Got it.
Let's go.
But I did,
Starting with this.
the town of Mamaroneck just did a bid opening for a signal replacement that was kind of similar in scope.
Mhm.
So I wanted to get a copy of their engineering RFP
Exactly,
and
so I'm just gonna do.
see what they did.
And I'm gonna send it to
But I
everybody.
mean, the bids came in pretty high for one signal. replacing this.
notes.
$700,000.
I'm gonna stand, is it okay if I stand up? That way?
Well, if you can come, if you want to take my seat because
For the mic?
the mic is right in the middle.
Yeah.
If you could take my seat, I'll be glad to get away.
I love you, don't go away, I need you to hear this.
I will be right here, Kate, just for you.
We have an extra chair.
Just take my coat off so it looks like more.
Never mind.
All right. Thank you. All right.
That's awesome, so I don't have to yell. You can tell me if I'm talking, Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I've been thinking a lot about I-95. I've discussed this with my committee, but I haven't made a formal presentation. This is really my own kind of thing, but from what I have said to the committee, they accept this general concept that I'm going to present tonight. So, and how much time do I have, Tony? 10 minutes? 8 minutes. Okay. Start the timer now. Okay, so the first picture, just so we get the big view, is basically, this is from the county, and I didn't label it very well, but this is basically the floodplain in the village. So the orange, the light orange is the, whoop, looks like Zoom went away. They're gone? Okay, because Neil might be interested in this.
I'm here.
I'm here.
Okay, fine. So the light orange is the 100-year floodplain and the dark is the 500-year floodplain. And basically, it's kind of see what's happening, which is that this highway was built in the mid-50s. It was conceptualized in the 30s and the 40s because everybody was bent out of, you think back, what we're upset about. They were all upset because there was so much truck traffic and pollution on Route 1 that people were dying to have an alternate corridor. So it got pushed through and finally approved in the 50s, and it took a long time to be built. And in those days, I was alive, I was a baby, but nobody cared about, wetlands, and nobody even heard about climate change or any of it. It was all about progress. And so people were super excited. And it was built pretty much, as you can see, right, alongside the rivers and in the floodplain of the Mamaroneck and Sheldrake rivers. And I later mentioned this, but if you look at the very bottom of the map, that's actually Larchmont. That's what we call Gardens Lake in Larchmont. People talk about it as the duck pond, right, where you used to skate and this and that. It was twice the size. In the 1950s, the Thruway Authority bought half of Gardens Lake. So think about that, how that affects flooding, or even look up near where the on-ramp is for when you get on 95 going south, you see that big lake there, that's Gedney Pond. And see how proximate it is. It's right up next to the highway land. So when there's a lot of water and that thing needs to expand and flood and hold more water, it can't do it. Okay, so page 2. What I did, and it's in an attachment, it's page 6, I think. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how much impervious surface the highway actually is. So I measured it. I have a Gaia program. I measured it. I went out and counted how many lanes wide is it? How wide are these shoulders? The whole darn thing, okay? And in all my calculations, I submit to you. And now why do we care? Okay, flood, we all know this. Impervious surface, obviously, no rainwater, floodwater can be absorbed, but it's also a scientific fact that you learn if you take environmental science or hydrology, that impervious surface accelerates the movement of floodwater, and it causes the peak flood conditions downstream to be higher and sooner. So it has a huge effect. The impervious surface, the I-95 occupies just in the village of Mamaroneck is 1,228,144 square feet. And so what does that mean? What did that mean in terms of Ida? And that a couple pages later, I went to the National Weather Service and downloaded the precipitation from that day. So that was September 2nd, not 2021. The day before, there was like a little bit of rain. The day after, what? September 1st? Well, okay. All right, well, this is the data that they gave me. So, maybe there's I don't know, but this is the data that I got. The point being that you can see, if you look at that page, it's color coded that the purple was where the highest rainfall was. And it was at 8.5 inches. So, so a calculation simply of how much water falls on a surface, this much square feet times that much, 8.5 inches of rain, it equates to 871,982 cubic feet of water that was basically accumulated on I-95 and delivered into the water bodies of the village of Mamaroneck. That's 6.5 million gallons. So that's what we're dealing with. Okay. It's on the, I wrote it on hand, so it's on handout 2, the image, and then if you want the data, on the last page of that handout is all my data, like from measuring and everything. So, I'm trying to really make sure that this is done right. And now on to the next screen. So the third handout is a picture of all of the clover leaves and whatnot. And I've numbered them. Which, so all of these entrance ramps and clover leaves are by definition sloped as they slope down towards the high, towards the village, because you're getting on an on-ramp. So they also have the effect of collecting water and channeling it down. So for example, if you look at number 3, that is the exit ramp when you're coming on 95 South and you get into that clover leaf. And we can talk about the condition of these clover leaves, but the downward slope of that delivers that water more rapidly to Mamaroneck Avenue. And at the bottom of Mamaroneck Avenue, there's a series of drains which get clogged with silt, and they get filled with water, and all of that gets delivered straight to the Mamaroneck River. So I was trying to figure out, to understand more, because as I drive along, I can see the drains, but I don't know what the what's going on here. So what do I know? So I'm trying to understand. We walk through Bub Walker Park. We see, okay, there's big drains there that look like they're coming right off the highway, collecting water, and that water goes right through a tube and it goes straight into the Sheldrake. On the other end of Bub Walker near Plaza, you can see it's coming down people's backyards in a channel. It's going into a tube and again, comes right out straight into the Sheldrake. And then I invited myself over to Bernie Camarda's house to find out what was going on there. And he very nicely gave me a cup of coffee and then showed me in his backyard. No, I had one cup, only one cup. I wanted another one, but anyway, next time. But anyway, and so you can see that it looks like the drains that are running along the I-95, it's about yo big, this thing. And it comes out and they very kindly dug out a little baby bioswale to gather a little water. And then it feeds down into what you call Ralph Avenue Creek, where if you go back to the first page, which is the flood map.
Wait, where is this, Kate?
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that one yet. I'll
Oh,
talk about
okay.
that one in a
Oh, all right.
minute. I'm just talking about drains in general,
Oh,
okay?
all right.
What is going on with the drains? If you go back to page 1, if you go up to Gedney, does everybody know what I'm talking about? Gedney Pond? Okay, so you see the little stream that comes out of Gedney, okay? That runs underneath the highway. It comes out right by Bernie's house, and then all of this water that's collected in these drains rolls along and joins with that. Actually, that straight line doesn't make sense to me because I'm told that it actually, that the culvert goes down Ralph Avenue, not across. I don't think so, even though it's on all the maps, so I can't make head or tail of it.
No, because Gino was there this week and he put the camera.
It goes down
So you know which way it goes, yeah.
So it goes.
And I even went over to
I played it
Hillside
as a child.
where this picture shows it coming out and it's not there. Yeah.
That falls into a 60-inch pipe at the Avalon.
Yeah,
30
yeah,
pipe.
that's what Bernie told me.
Right? That's what
Yeah.
it was, right?
Two
230s
230s,
into a 60-inch
a
at the Avalon.
54,
Oh, yeah,
and then a 60.
and then a 60, right, I forgot about.
Okay, so last picture, I took this picture, this is just, to give you a feel. Like, okay, so they built this highway, and they put drains in. As far as we know, there's no filtration, there's no mitigation, there's no nothing. Now, this is roughly, kind of behind it, where is it exactly? Behind Blondie's, behind Save-A-Tree, it's on the Sheldrake, okay? So if you're on the Sheldrake and you walk down a little ways, more or less by the end of Ogden Avenue, if you know where that is, we're talking about in the industrial district. You walk down and I looked across, I never saw this before, but so where this piece of 95 is roughly where it's the exit ramp of no, not 18A. So if you're on I-95 going, maybe it's 18A, going north, where it goes down to Fenimore. Is that 18A? Okay. And so this drain, I suppose, is collecting from other drains and putting it together, but look at the damn thing. It's falling down, it's collapsing. Look at even their fence is collapsing. It's full of garbage back there, just by the way. And then look at the erosion. The whole hill behind the dam or behind the drain is completely eroded. And then look at the river itself. So which is completely eroded out, the stream bank. So that is done by fast moving water. So I'm just going to theorize that in heavy rains, the volume of water that's coming out of this drain has contributed to the erosion in this location. So what is that? So if it's happening here, it's happening everywhere, up and down the rivers. And we know that. So, somebody on my committee said they're a public nuisance. In a way, yeah. And all of this silt that's accumulating in the river, which is going to keep on accumulating in the river, is impeding the flow of water, is making the floods worse, and then it has to be dredged out, and it costs a lot of money to do that we pay for, and it's gonna come right back. As soon as it's dredged out, it's gonna come right back because of this mess. And so that's wow, that's bad, right? Now the Thruway Authority is an enormous entity with a huge budget. It's part of New York, it's New York State Thruway Authority. The I-95 is part of the federal interstate system. So these are large, powerful entities. All of this, they built it in the 50s, when there was no law. So fine, okay? So that brings me to so these are my conclusions. See, I'm gonna come in at under 8 minutes, man. I'm rolling. All right, so in conclusion, on your additional handout, what? What?
That alarm was the 8 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I don't want to be thrown out or, whatever, whatever. So large impervious surface, which prevents the infiltration of water, exacerbates peak flood conditions. Okay, also interferes with the natural functioning of water bodies and their ability to hold water, i.e. Gardens Lake, i.e. Gedney Pond, etc. Is it having a deleterious impact on flooding in Mamaroneck? I do believe so. Okay, what are you gonna do about it? And that's why I've given you 4 pages of legalese that I took out of a document called New York Department of Transportation Highway Design Manual, Chapter 8. So that's 135 pages. Thank you, Kate, for reading that. Okay, out of a document which is about 1,000 pages long. What you can read this at your leisure. What is the conclusion? The conclusion is under federal law, state law, local law, the LWRP, thank you. You cannot do this. You cannot build this way. You build a highway now, it has to be completely compliant with contemporary flood. It cannot, example, department, legal aspects. Department is obligated by state and federal laws to protect the highway, fine, adjacent land beyond the highway from discharge, floodplains, et cetera, et cetera. So if you flip through any of this, you'll see that they have to completely deal with all of their runoff themselves and have no deleterious impact in Mamaroneck at all or anywhere. However, they have an enormous impact. So what can we do about it? And what I am proposing is that we, take this information and we make the case. Okay, so what are the fixes? The first is those roundabouts. And so I'm going to wind up real quick. The clover leaves and all of the spaces, including the triangularly shaped spaces, not just the circles, right? That they should be, that the highway authority should regrade them so that they have they function as a catchment basin and completely landscape all of them with water absorbing trees like willows and wetland plants, all of those spaces, okay? And I even think maybe they could divert some of the Gedney Pond overflow into one of those spaces too, to keep it from going into your backyards. So this is legal, and it's also political. I think that, so what I propose is that when you have a little more time, think about this, if you support this proposal, that this is a problem and we need to take the case to the Thruway Authority that they are going to fix it and they're going to pay for it. So the fixes are to the clover leaves and the roundabouts, and really that what they should have is along the highway, maybe it's in the interior, they should have dry wells to trap all that water. Now that's going to cost tens of millions of dollars or many millions of dollars. So we get this committee, we get the Committee for the Environment, we get the Board of Trustees, then we get Shelley Meyer, Steve Otis, the Westchester County, and all interested parties to lobby New York State Thruway Authority to fix their problem, to mitigate their problem. Yes.
You still have Neil, you still on?
Okay.
Yeah. Neil?
Yes, I am.
So, I think we need to applaud Kate for her presentation.
Both the speed and the volume. You're welcome.
I think if FMAC members agree, we'd like to add this as one of our top level priority projects. to, and I'm gonna just wing it here, address in all manners possible the stormwater flows off of I-95 that wind up in the village.
Yeah.
It's
28.2 acres. That's what
From
Pete's
approximately-
population comes.
That's how many, wow,
28
that's how much square footage it is? Holy moly, that's a lot.
acres of stormwater.
Wow.
That flow.
But the stormwater of the impervious surface.
Impervious surface. Yeah, I just did it in square feet, but you're right,
This should also be looked at for the hutch, because the hutch is dumping the water higher up
right.
into Saxon Woods and. into
Yeah.
the-
Okay.
river, And it's coming all through the village
Right.
as well, so.
And also the mountain on 95 too.
Yeah,
Studies should be done.
The mountain off 95.
Yeah. right. Well, I mean,
Same people.
talking about, well, that's one of the clover leaves that we're talking about.
Right.
That,
part of what she's saying.
yeah, I mean, that's an example.
28 acres, is that going into the shelter, or is that?
Well, I'm just talking about,
28.2 acres is coming into the village.
Right, got it.
I'm just talking about the part of I-95 as it's only the footprint in the village of Mamaroneck. That's it, you know? And yeah, so like talking about those clover leaves, right? That, you know, like you know, that they are degraded, that they all should be, you know, made into bioswales, into wetland retention basins. And of course, step one is get the frickin' dirt out of there. Hello. I mean, that's insane. I mean, honestly, it's like, not only did they build it with no flood mitigation, but the way that they are dealing with their equipment and everything else, it's frankly abusive. And it's making our flooding worse. I mean, it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
Okay, so simple question.
Yes.
On the cloverleaf is the only way to go, because that's the only thing that they'll be able to do that has a substantial impact. As far as all the other drains and
Right.
all of that stuff, they don't want to, they won't want to go anywhere near that, because that's big money.
It's big money, but
Right.
Yeah,
That's big money.
But if you, I mean, read through the legal stuff, I mean, they're just ignoring it, but what they're doing is, yeah, go ahead.
Meeting, Neil, can we get this
Okay.
in the plan as a top level item?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I think you like Kate said, it's two-pronged. There's the actual, you know, logic behind, you know, just your investigation, what you've done, and the potential stormwater reduction, all that stuff. And then the second one is the lobbying aspect of it.
Mhm.
Working with legislators. I'm sure neighboring municipalities have some impact as well, you know, from 95. So, but also you do want the attention on Mamaroneck though, especially. So, yeah, I think there could easily be, if that's something that's if other folks are feel that this is a compelling idea to move forward with, we could just talk about it in both ways, just the logic behind it and then the lobbying behind it.
Our committee agrees this should be a top level priority.
You want to vote?
Sets of systems
Excuse me?
for the hutch as well as.
I
agree with that.
It
It should be
the
the
highways, please
Yeah.
include the I-95 and the Hutchinson River Parkway, okay?
The Hutch is a different legal entity though. I mean, who?
Oh, right.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
I'm not sure I have the
But
energy.
I have a very quick question. Dave, are they now breaking any laws?
I don't think so.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, they're,
Okay.
but
Well, designed.
terms of-
all those kind of
they,
standards.
you know, they make statements, for example, let me see. Like on the last page, let me see if this is the one I wanted. The legal aspects, the collection and diversion of surface waters may result in discharges which create a flooding problem which did not exist prior to the project. A storage facility should be provided to mitigate the increased discharge resultant from storm drainage. So I think there's enough in their own documentation that we need we need lawyers for this.
Look what they did in Portchester.
Yes,
If you looked at that
yes,
new construction.
yes.
It has all of those things are there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they need to come in here and retrofit it. And so like a drain like this one needs to be fixed. And just like when you go for a building permit, when you go to do it, You got to do it right by the new code. So here's an example. Yeah, so there, everything is 1950s stuff, which is collapsing. It's got to be redone. Of course, it's going to be a lot of money. This is a heavy lift. I'm not, but I think,
But it's all,
No, it has to
it's
be
all
done.
political.
yes, very
It's all
much
political.
so.
They'll only do it
Yes,
because of the politics.
yes.
Isn't that where the
Nobody
dirt
can
came
sue 'em.
from, Portchester?
Mhm.
It-
Yes.
Came from Portchester.
it came from Portugal.
All right, so.
And authorities have more power than God, right? Authorities.
Mhm.
Can you tell me what happened in Portchester, what Portester did again?
The renovation.
Project, it was the bridge.
Oh, I see, got it.
Last mile.
Midland Avenue, yes, that whole.
But the appointees or the individuals who serve on these
Mm-hmm.
authorities are appointed by the state legislator and the state legislature as well as the governor. So that's where you have the potential political connection. As
Mhm.
far as getting to the authorities, they can listen to you, they can ignore you, but
Right.
it's our state representatives who are supposed to fight for us.
Yes, yes. So we need to really gather, all of our forces and make, and more data and make sure it's really solid. And, don't just rely on me, get your people to, support it and then make that case. And it will be political and there will be, publicity aspects to it and all of that to get them to really commit to come in here to do the right thing.
There's one other point.
Yes.
We had 8.5 inches in Ida.
Yes.
We had 9.5 in 2007. The 9.5 was over a 24-hour period.
Okay.
Somehow a hydrologist needs to factor into this because the water that came in Ida was over a shorter period of time and it was much more intense.
Right.
We got much more in this
Mhm.
shorter period of time, how that exacerbates this.
Mhm.
And I think that's something a hydrologist would
Mhm.
add in.
Yeah, I've done as much as I can. Now it's a hydrologist and lawyers that need to. And by the way, the chair of our committee is an environmental lawyer and I'm not, volunteering his services, but there's people who do this and would take this, this case.
Okay.
All right.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Kate.
Thank you.
Neil, thank you for coming on. Jerry, thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Company with us.
Showing up. Motion to close the meeting, please. So moved.
What about the Boston Post bill?
Yeah.
The Boston Post.
Boston Post Road, point to, Jerry's got looking into 0.2 inches. Now circulate. I'll circulate a little. According to the hydraulic HA study, the coatings on the walls will raise the flood level 0.2 feet
Up to Tompkins.
up to top.
Right. It
We
was,
have
we
that
got those
we got
emails.
Today.
We got the emails in
They came just before we were meeting.
I sent it, did I just send it to Tony G or everybody?
No, I got it.
Okay. It's in there. It's in there.
What?
Bernie.
She's gonna have a slight. It's gonna be sure what they're.
Thank you very much.
Huh?
Look, it is-
That's all, that's the last thing. They're saying that it's not going to.
Hi.
I
Well,
didn't.
I'm just saying,
I
man,
didn't
you
see
have
that.
to be so